Okay, very good. Well, I would like to say hello and welcome to all of our medical students joining us. We're so glad that you're all with us tonight. And welcome to the AAO HNS National Medical Student Forum, Is Otolaryngology in Your Future? We really appreciate you joining us. We hope this program to be the beginning, not the end of a relationship, the beginning of a relationship, and hope that you'll stay in contact with us. We plan to make some initial welcomes and introductions, talk a little bit about our academy, student membership within the academy, and then we'll go over a number of questions that have been submitted and that we thought would be important. And we'll also blend with our questions some questions that you put in through the Q&A function, which I'll get into in just a second. We hope this program is the beginning of a relationship and the beginning of a welcome to really a wonderful field of otolaryngology. I want to first thank Elise Swinehart and Pam Gilbert and Jim Denaney of the Academy for their professional, high-quality work in the coordination of this event. And so I want to start by introducing our amazing panel. I think we can all say that in discussion, many of us decided to think about otolaryngology because of the really amazing anatomy, the cool surgeries, the functional aspects of hearing and seeing and speech and swallowing and so forth that were drawn into our surgery. But ultimately, for many of us, it was the people who made up who kind of drew us to the specialty initially. And I think in this panel, you'll see what I mean about the quality and specialness and friendliness and intelligence of the people. This is really a dream team, and I'm very gratified that everyone is taking their time out after busy days and away from family to share with you their experiences. We will have, this panel represents a wide range of practice types. So there are some otolaryngologists on this panel that are in private practice, some in academics. They range in the areas of otolaryngology that they focus on, some focusing on laryngology, some on sinus and skull base, some in head and neck surgery, some in general comprehensive otolaryngology, and some in thyroid. And so you'll get, I think, a very good blended balance of a good feel for otolaryngology. So let's just first start by introducing Bill Blythe. Bill is in private practice. He's the managing partner of East Alabama ENT. He's also a member of the board of directors of the Academy and is joining us tonight. Bill, you want to say hi?
Hey there, welcome to everyone, and I hope that you all find this intriguing and inviting, and that you learn a little bit more about the best specialty of medicine, which is otolaryngology, head and neck surgery.
Thank you, Bill. And we have then Zainab Farzal, who is the chair of the Academy's section on residents and fellows in training. She is a PGY5 in the Department of Otolaryngology at University of North Carolina and is a T32 postdoctoral research fellow there. Zainab, would you say hi?
Hi, everyone. Welcome. I'm so excited all of you are here. As Dr. Randolph mentioned, I'm a fifth year on a 7-year research track, of which there are a few around the country, in addition to the standard 5-year track at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. I'm excited to answer any questions you all have today. I think what attracted me to ENT were the wonderful people and the very, the diversity of things that we see and can do in ENT.
Thank you, Zainab. And then I'd like to introduce my partner and who works here with me at Harvard, Stacy Gray. Dr. Gray is Vice Chair of Education and the Otolaryngology Program Director here at Harvard and is a sinus and skull base surgeon. Stacy, you want to say hey?
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to say hi. Really looking forward to the panel and getting to talk about a field that we all really are passionate about and love.
And then next, I'll introduce Sonia Malexides. I've known Sonia for many years, mainly through the Academy work that we've both done. She's the Residency Program Director and Vice Chair of Education and Professor of Otolaryngology at Georgetown. Sonia?
Good evening to everyone. I certainly echo everyone else's comments. Welcoming you to this panel, to this event. Thank you to Dr. Randolph and the Academy also for putting this together. And I hope that we can share with you our passion for the specialty and answer any questions that you might have in the next hour or so.
Thank you. And then Al Muradi. Dr. Muradi is a professor and chief of laryngology at the University of Washington School of Medicine. He's also an adjunct professor in music, an adjunct professor in speech and hearing sciences. And I think when he describes his work, he'll explain all of those credentials. He's also has been president of the American Academy 2018 to 2019. Al, we so much appreciate you taking time on your time off to join us on our panel.
Right on. It's really great to be here. I just, I found the people that I resonated with, and it's been a wonderful ride. And I think that the people part's powerful. The anatomy's awesome, and we're going to talk all about it. We're all just can't wait to talk about it.
Thank you, Al. And Angela Powell, my great friend, she works now in the Guthrie Clinic in New York. She's assistant professor at the Edward Herbert School of Medicine, president of the Harry Barnes Medical Society, and I think she can discuss that a little bit when we talk about diversity within otolaryngology, is the immediate past chair of Women in Otolaryngology, and I'll ask her to comment on what is Women in Otolaryngology, WIO, an important group within our academy, and is also Commander Medical Corps, U.S. Navy Reserves. Angela?
Okay, that was a mouthful. I don't think I have anything to add for that list for you, but I have already started to see some of my friends, medical student mentees, shooting messages to me, and I'm thankful that we have this forum to speak on all of the wonders of the specialty. So I look forward to the dialogue and discussion.
Great. Thank you. And not last but not least is Ken Yanakasawa. Ken is in private practice in Yale, New Haven. He's the managing partner of Southern New England Ear, Nose, and Throat Surgical Group, which is one of our largest national private practice groups. He's president-elect of the American Academy, and we'll be talking about a range of different interests within comprehensive otolaryngology. Ken?
Thank you so much, Greg. And thank you all attendees for taking time out of your evenings to share and to hopefully learn a lot about this specialty. I must echo what Greg and all the others had said, that among the surgical subspecialties, I think that otolaryngologists are the nicest, caring, and friendliest folks that are out there. Hopefully you'll get a taste of that with what we share with you tonight. And I will say that in my dad, who was an otolaryngologist as well, he's 90 now, so he's retired, but he always used to say back when I was at your stage that in his, quote, unbiased opinion, that ENT was the only specialty to choose. And I must say that I'm very happy that I chose it. So hopefully we can share some of our experiences with you all and help you to make your decisions on which directions you're choosing to take. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. I'm Greg Randolph. I'm the Claire and John Bertucci Chair in Thyroid Surgical Oncology at Harvard Medical School, and I was president of the Academy in 2016, 2017, and welcome you again, and thank you so much for all of our panelists taking time and for all of medical students joining us. Again, this is really the beginning of a relationship here, and so we have all worked with the Academy to provide this email address for any and all subsequent calls. So Bill was talking with our panelists about how do we manage otolaryngology applicants that come from a program that doesn't necessarily have an otolaryngology program, and what special needs do those individuals have. So that would be an example of sending us information through this email, and then we can provide you, our panelists and Academy resources provide you some contacts and resources. So please note down that email, and we're happy to take continue the conversation after tonight's panel. The Academy, you see, is the underpinning much of our work within the field. This is really the organization. The American Academy of Otolaryngology Head and Neck Surgery is the organization which is really all of our professional homes. It's the largest organization in the U.S. for otolaryngologists, nearly 13,000 members, 1,100 international members, and it supports otolaryngologists through civic advocacy, education, networking, publications, and many other issues. And this will be drawn up as many of our panelists talk about their careers and how the Academy is interdigitated with their career and the blossoming of their career. There is a student membership available, a medical student membership available within the Academy, and there are resources there for you to consider that. So again, we would like to blend the questions that we've thought long and hard about, that we'd like to start the panelists in their kind of discussions about the most important issues that we think are good to get across to you, but we want to make sure that we have access to your questions. So Elise and Pam are going to funnel us the questions that you distribute to us through the Q&A tab. So it's not through the chat. You're welcome to use the chat tab, but questions that you want sent to us and to ask of the panelists, please use the Q&A tab. Okay, now I think, Elise, you can go ahead and reduce down the slides because it's about the people, not the slides now. So when you have a chance, and I'll just start with Angela. I'll ask you first, what are the surgeries that you do that you are excited about that constitute the bulk or one of the major parts of your work overall? What are the surgeries? What's the anatomy? What are the patients and the problems that those surgeries deal with?
So I'm a comprehensive general otolaryngologist, which means that my practice encompasses pretty much all of the areas of ENT without a specific focus area. But my favorite patients are my cancer patients. And part of that has to do with the fact that you can provide those patients with long-term care. There's a relationship that's built with them. There's a collaborative team approach to caring for them. And so we're able to partner with other specialties in order to provide high level, high quality care. And the surgeries are intricate, they're detailed, the anatomy, as you start to matriculate and get past the initial cadaver dissections in medical school, you'll notice that the intricacies of the head and neck are something that I think it can take a lifetime to fully comprehend and appreciate. And the nerve structures that are involved that we are preserving as part of doing these operations as much as we can, and the functional outcomes that we're able to achieve with reconstructive techniques and approaches, I think places our specialty in, and the fact that we can collaborate with other surgeons in those reconstructive approaches places us in a unique field that you won't find elsewhere. I considered other specialties, as many of you will, and during my rotations, ENT ended up being a fit for me, not just because of the anatomy, which is wonderful, and not just because of the patients, which are also fantastic, but also because of my colleagues. We get along, and I enjoy seeing them at our annual meetings, and I'm so thankful to have them as my partners. And with that, I will turn it back over to Greg.
So now, Angela, Angela talked about head and neck surgery. So Bill, you do also in private practice a range of different surgeries, and that also includes otologic surgery. So what are a couple of the diagnoses that you manage, the actual patient problems that you manage, and why are the surgeries appealing to you? Why do you like to keep doing them? What is it about them, the surgeries?
Well, let me just say how much I appreciate being here and have an opportunity to brag on our wonderful specialty. I I love ENT because the anatomy is the best anatomy. It's complex, it's interesting, it's just wonderful anatomy. And I also, like Angela, I have a true comprehensive general otolaryngology practice, and I do pretty much everything from children to adults, cancer, sinus. But my practice is very heavy in otologic surgery. I got very interested in that when I returned from residency because no one was doing cochlear implants outside of Birmingham in Alabama, and I started a cochlear implant program here. And since then, I've done over 1,200 cochlear implants. I've done a lot of bone anchored hearing aids, stapes surgery, and a lot of other types of ear surgery. And those are just those are miracle operations. The cochlear implant is one of the most cost-effective, most impactful surgeries in all of healthcare, and one of the most impactful interventions in all of healthcare. And it's just amazing, and it's a wonderful surgery.
So what medical problem would be an indication for cochlear implant, and what would be the benefit of doing that?
So cochlear implantation is for patients with profound hearing impairment. So basically those that are deaf. And the wonderful thing about being a ear specialist this day and time is there's really not much that we can't fix or significantly rehabilitate, whether that is through surgery on the eardrum, surgery on the middle ear space, hearing aids, bone anchored hearing aids, middle ear surgery, and now with cochlear implantation and bone anchored hearing aids. There's really not much about the hearing sense that we can't rehabilitate. So it's really wonderful. And those are for the worst patients, either those that are born hearing impaired or those who become hearing impaired throughout the course of life.
Now, let me ask Stacy. Stacy Gray has an academic practice, and so that is also very focused within a specific area. Stacy, could you describe your types of surgeries that you focus on? Why are they cool? What draws you to them? How do you benefit the patient?
Thanks, Greg. And I'll echo what Bill said earlier. It's just wonderful to be here and to get to talk about something that we really enjoy doing on a daily basis. So my practice is rhinology and endoscopic skull-base surgery. So I primarily, at this point, just do surgery done endoscopically through the nasal cavity. And at the time that I was a resident in the early 2000s, endoscopic skull-base surgery was a field that was just developing. And so for me, the reason that I sort of got excited about it was because it was a brand new way to access intracranial tumors through the nose, and then provide a reconstructive ability that really changed pretty dramatically over the last 15 years. So the types of patients that I see can range from cancer patients that have sinus and nasal tumors, to inflammatory sinus disease. So patients with nasal polyps. I see a lot of patients with cystic fibrosis that have had lung transplants that have sinus disease. And then patients who have some kind of an intracranial pathology that can be operated on through the nose, or an orbital pathology that can be operated on through the nose. So pituitary tumors, intracranial meningiomas, craniopharyngioma, and orbital tumors. So I mean, obviously, I think the surgery is very cool. And I think the fact that you can provide a lot of sort of maximal surgery through the nostrils without creating any external sort of visual clue that you've been there really it's a very exciting field.
Now, Zainab, you are at the beginning of your career, and you may not have had quite enough time to make a definite decision, but I have a feeling that you have your preferences and your direction. So could you give us a sense of what you're thinking about as the area that you would work on from the surgical perspective?
Sure. I'm leaning heavily towards rhinology and anterior skull-base surgery as well. That was sort of an area of focus for me in terms of research as a med student, and then also in my time in training here. I love the fact that, you can do endoscopic, basically minimally invasive surgery, as Dr. Gray was saying, as well as potentially some open cases too. Involves cancer, involves inflammatory pathology. I love all of it. So that's what I'm leaning towards.
Look at Dr. Gray light up. That was awesome. That was magic. Sorry, I did.
It's reinforcement.
No,
Awesome.
we consider this like a small little field, but it's really gigantic, in all of this from head and neck to otology to skull base. And we haven't even gone through the panel. So Sonia, maybe I could ask you, of the work that you do, what's the sweet spot for you? You do a range of different work, but what's the sweet spot in terms of what patient problems are you helping and why do you like that surgery?
Oh my goodness. Well, I would say that my practice has evolved over the years. I am probably an anomaly. I'm a general otolaryngologist in the academic setting. I think, this day and age, most of the academicians are fellowship trained. So with that, I love, I'm not necessarily focused in one area. There's so much that I love about our specialty. And so this enables me to really, practice the whole breadth and depth of our specialty. I started my career at Georgetown, where about a third of my practice was head and neck, a third was sleep, and a third was rhinology. And of the last decade or so, I've transitioned over to the VA hospital. So the majority of my clinical practice is in the VA setting. And it seems that now I've become the rhinologist, Stacy. Although I'm not a fellowship trained rhinologist, there's a lot of rhinosinusitis in the Washington, D.C. area. So similar to what Stacy has stated, I love the endoscopic toys that we have. That's the one thing I can say about our specialty is we have great equipment, great toys. Microscopes, robots, all of that I think is appealing. But
The tools.
the tools, the equipment that we have.
Cool tools.
Yes, exactly. Very cool tools.
Speaking of cool tools, Al, laryngology has its fair share of cool tools. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what is a laryngologist? What patient problems do you typically see, and what do you love most doing and why?
And thank you, Greg, and thanks to everybody. It's a bit of a microcosm of our field. We have this whole rainbow of options for our students that to explore. We do breathing, talking, and swallowing. Those are the big three. In one day, I might care for an opera singer. I might care for somebody with a cancer of the vocal cord. I might care for somebody who can't swallow. These are the most human things. Dr. Blythe talked about, Bill talked about restoring hearing, right? Those magic moments on CNN where, the kid hears. I mean, that's otolaryngology. When somebody hasn't been able to eat and they take their first bite. I posted one thing on Twitter of a patient operated on a sweet guy who just couldn't swallow. And we did something that we were trained to do, and just the joy when he can just get food down, the dinner table, talking on the phone, hearing. This is what we have the privilege to do. And I wouldn't trade it for anything. So
No, it's interesting. It's interesting. I mean, you'd think that would turn us off because I think, of all the cranial nerves, every one of our surgeries is ramified by one or more cranial nerves. You'd think we'd be like, let's go to another part of the body where we don't have to worry about all of those nerves. But that kind of blend of doing something to improve hearing, to take out a cancer, but also optimizing that neural function is the juice of it.
It's surgical neurology. I do reinnervations. I'm going to Children's Hospital next week to put a new nerve into a kid's vocal cord. This poor kid is having trouble with their voice. And, so again, it's a huge, broad area. Folks who practice in a niche like me, we have certain advantages. And I think the heroes for a lot of our students are the folks who have a really broad practice, and they have a gift and a mastery of putting things together like I think the subspecialists don't. So there is lots of choice out there, and there's a charge. You can see the thread running through the conversation, but there's enough variety that I think that the students are turned on, and I'm just so excited to be here. Thank you.
So far you've heard you could do allergy in the office and never operate, or you could do big open head and neck surgical procedures all day long, or microlaryngeal surgery, or skull base surgery, anterior skull base surgery, rhinology, lateral skull base surgery, otology, acoustic neuromas. This seems not to be a small field anymore. Ken, what about you? You also do a range of different work. What's your sweet spot? What's your surgery that you especially like? And just tell us a little bit about what anatomy has drawn you to that. We got to unmute Ken.
All right, good. Now there's sound with my lips moving. That's good. So thank you, Greg. And I think everybody's gotten a great sense of sort of, the diversity of what we do. I too am a comprehensive general otolaryngologist, so I get to enjoy the full spectrum of what we do. And I must say, a lot of what you've heard, the laryngology that Al does, there's nothing like taking a person who can't speak and you remove something using a laser or whatever tools you may use, and all of a sudden they come out of that surgery speaking, which they haven't been able to do. Ditto for sinus work, which we'll possibly get into it, but a lot has been done in the operating room, but a lot of it now has transitioned in the office. So things that we didn't think would be doable in the office setting, it's just amazing how much we're just pushing all the boundaries and doing it safely and successfully. I think the piece that I would add that hasn't been touched on yet, doing patients from children up to the elderly, is pediatrics. It's a little piece that I really enjoy, perhaps the most of all the patients that I see, and just a couple of snippets of things that we do that are life changing for our patients. One is you've got a kid that perhaps can't hear, and if it's a nerve problem, like Bill was talking about, that there are some solutions, but sometimes it's something as simple as their middle ear is just full of fluid and they can't hear. And sometimes we occasionally will see these kids that come in aphonic. They're not speaking even at the age of 3, 4, 5 years of age. And if we go and do a relatively simple surgery to put a tube in there, drain the fluid, bring the hearing back, you see vocabulary and words start coming out of the kids' mouths. You see joy on the parents' faces and just sort of the success and the goodness that you feel. There's nothing quite like seeing that with our patients when we've helped them. And I'd say another piece is in the pediatric realm, the tonsillectomies and adenoidectomies that we do, that we've got kids, some that either for infection problems have been living on antibiotics, month after month. You do this reasonably straightforward surgery, and all of a sudden they're not living on antibiotics anymore. And the other reason that we often do that surgery is for breathing problems. So if they have airway obstruction, sleep apnea, sometimes it's as straightforward as you remove these gigantic kissing, touching tonsils, get them out of the way, and now they're breathing, the snoring is gone, their performance, their activity, everything improves. So I think our ability to really diagnose and change our patients' lives is what really drives me a lot. And as you had mentioned, Greg, we do everything from, microsurgery, like these tubes and the cochlear implants, et cetera. These are all done under a microscope, very fine motor skills needed, all the way to the larger procedures. And one of those is thyroid. So, so Greg, I know that's your sweet spot. So maybe you could share some of that with us.
Yeah, well, to thank you. I love to do thyroid surgery because you can get better at it the more you do. And that is an addictive recipe. The patient's voice after my surgery, which is adjacent to the recurrent laryngeal nerve, the patient's calcium profile being more stable, I learn that I'm getting better. And that is tremendously seductive. It's a very positive vibe that you can feel your improvement over time because your patients postoperatively show you this. That's pretty cool. The surgery, just the neck base anatomy is just, I feel like it's like going to an altar, and it's kind of the same altar, and the repetitive familiarity of it is very appealing, but it is perversely slightly different from person to person to person. And that sameness, but slight difference that you have to be very cool with is, you'd think, well, why would you want to go to the same place every day? It's just like, because I see the Godhead when I do that, to get better and better and more familiar with all of those various slight modifications of the anatomy, which are basically still the same and iterative, is really, really seductive. So I was actually going to switch gears a little bit and just have anybody in the panel talk about why they went into ENT, because I have a funny little story about my nephew who just went into ENT, and he gave the same reasons as I did with 30 years apart. And I wonder if it's going to be a similar tone. But actually, before that, we have a question that has come in through the chat, which I think is an important one, especially for women, although I think I want to expand it beyond that. And I want to ask Stacy and Sonia and Angela to weigh in on how do you manage work-life balance? Like, as an otolaryngologist, how can you do that? What's the problems with doing it? Are you able to accomplish that? Is it something you try and just keep working at? But I also want to expand it to beyond women, because I think, time management is a problem everybody has, women, men, and everybody. And I think I want to ask, like Bill in private practice, how does he manage his day in time? And then also ask, Al in academics, how does he manage? Because, you can louse it up in private practice or in academics, or you can do it well in either setting, but it's maybe a little different recipe. So first, I want to just ask some of the women that have been practicing for a while, Stacy, Sonia, and then Angela, about what's the trick? Can you do it? Is it an ongoing task? Stacy, would you comment on work-life balance as an otolaryngologist?
I think Angela should go first.
And see, what I was thinking was similar to this Biden kind of inauguration coming up, and the confirmations and the impeachment hearing being buying our time. I was going to toss it to Zainab and say, as an individual in the group in training, probably work-life balance is the most challenging for her. And so I would start there. But because you tossed it to me, I probably can't toss it twice. So I will say, as a resident, I had a toddler, and I was the first, I believe, in my residency program to actually have a toddler in training as a woman. And it's not a simple task. It's not simple. No one should be thinking that any specialty that you go into that you're going to have a simple task, but it's doable, it's manageable, and you have the support that you need to succeed. You see, all of us are here. We've been successful. We've managed it, and you'll do the same thing. So I also have stopped using those terms, work-life balance, and I've started saying trade-offs. And I think that's a more reasonable way to think about your life. And there are periods of time where you have to give more time to one area and less time to another, and then you make up for it in the next chapter. And so I think if you have a loving partner, if you're married, or if you're in a committed relationship, or if you have family supports, or you have a means of release, whatever that might be, you can manage it and you'll love it. You every day that passes, even if you're sleep deprived, you will be thinking about how you can make it better the next day, because that's just the field that we're in.
Stacy and Sonia, would you chime in?
I like to, it's a elusive work-life balance. And I agree with Angela that I don't like the word balance. I think it's hard to achieve balance. It's a yin and a yang. It's a back and forth. Work-life integration is how I think of it. I am married with 4 children and 2 dogs. So you can imagine my plate is full, and I have a full-time practice, clinical practice. I'm the program director. It is possible. I don't think that our specialty is any different than other surgical specialties, but I think it is a kinder surgical specialty. There certainly are rough patches along the way, but we go into it with eyes wide open. Yes.
Stacy, how about you?
So I have one child, and she is now 15. So I had her during fellowship. And similar to what everyone has said, I think that residency seems like a really long time when you're a medical student, and 5 years seems like a lifetime, especially because comparing it to medical school, it is actually longer. But the truth is, and now 15 years on the other side of that, and with a lot more to go, it's a very short period of time. And residency is harder to balance things, simply because you're not as in control of your schedule. But it is a short time commitment, to a lifetime of a career. And one of the things that I think is important to remember is that when you're in the midst of training, it is challenging. There's nothing that isn't challenging about a surgical residency. That having support during that time is really very crucial. And we have many trainees that decide to have families during training, and it is very manageable. But it's something that requires work, just as it does with any other job. Anyone who is balancing working and raising a family, I think it can be very challenging. But when you're finished and when you choose a practice, you get to decide. And there are a lot of questions that are being asked about balance between seeing patients in clinic and the operating room and how you manage all of that. And the great thing about finishing training is once you're done, you make a decision about how you want to structure your practice, and that can change. It doesn't have to be the same when you're first starting practice. When I took about 6 months off before I started working to be home with my daughter, and then I worked part-time for a little while before I went back to being full-time, which is not that common in an academic practice. And again, having support both at home and with your partners at work is extremely important, and making sure that everyone knows that if a family or outside life is important to you, that you make it a priority. And if you do that, you make choices about when you're sort of making those decisions. And the great thing after you're finished is that you get to make those choices for yourself. So a little bit more challenging during training, but definitely doable when you're done.
Now, Ken, I know you're a very active parent as well as a very busy managing partner. I know your children are all swimmers, and you have driven hundreds of billions of miles to their meets over the years. What can you tell us about how you get out of the office in private practice and manage time and still be a good dad?
So thank you, Greg. I have, just by way of background, my wife is an internist. We have 5 children. 3 of them were born during my residency. And so I've got a lot of people, friends, patients even, that ask me, how do you find the time to do this? And I always have the same answer. I make it very clear. You don't find the time, you create the time. And the only way that you can create this is through a word that you've already heard, which is prioritization. You need to figure out what is your passion. You need to drive your life towards it, make time for it. And so in my personal early career, I worked extremely hard in my practice, but my number one priority, I love a lot of stuff, landscaping, magic, photography, but my number one piece was to make sure that I was there for my kids. And so I ran our local Little League. I coached multiple sports. I coached AAU softball for 10 years. I ran and I still run and officiate swim meets as a USA Swim official. And so it's really, I did all of my energy towards that. And that was important. And I never regret having done that. And certainly as they've grown up a bit and I've created a little more space and time for myself to expand into, what I'm doing here in our field, it can be done. If I could share a very quick story just about time, I think life is relative, and time management is so key. So back when I was a resident, I was on call every other night, often. And so for every 48-hour span, I would be in the hospital for 42 hours, and they let me go for about 6. And then the next day I'd go in for 42. And this was a sequence that was just maddening. And I actually made the mistake once of complaining to my dad. And when I did, he said, "That's good." And I said, "What are you talking about? This is good." And he gave the old quote, "When I was a resident, I lived in that dorm across the street and I was on 24/7, 365. So if you got out 6 hours every 2 days, that's pretty good." So I learned never complain to him again. But even, with all these hours, I did manage to have a life to, know and still have my wife and continue all the activities. And I think that everybody on this call has, in their own way, had similar challenges of time constraints. And I think we've all turned out pretty well. So my message to you is, even when these times were so harsh with time, I am very confident, especially with the measures that we're building into residency, our restrictions, all this attention now to the importance of life balance, to wellness, that every single one of you can do it and you will do it well. So thank you.
We're hearing, it's custom, it changes over time, and it's a very active process to disengage and know when to go home. Let me ask Zanab, for you as a young woman who is still in the process of near completing her training, what are the stresses, what are the ways that you deal with this work life rhythm?
So that's a fantastic question. And I think it comes back to having an amazing support system at work and also outside work. And, I think we've all mentioned a whole lot how much we love our colleagues and how the people were what attracted us in part to our fields. And I think that's a lot of it. Having support at work all the time. I'm on a consult rotation right now. So, being able to go up to any attending to ask him about a very unusual type case has been super helpful for me. Overall, I think, wherever you go, it's one of the hardest things you'll do as you're training. And basically having people, I've just leaned a lot on family and a lot on my work family. So that's been great. Mostly, with COVID, it's been tough, but de-stressing, just remembering to take care of myself, giving myself some time at the end of the day. I'm not married, I don't have kids. So I have to say, I definitely have it easier than a couple of my colleagues. But basically making sure I make time for me. I think that's important. And wherever you are, whatever level of training you're in, I think that kind of is one of the things you have to keep in mind as you go through.
Bill, let me ask you, you've got a busy private practice, and I know you are a very active and engaged parent. And so how do you draw the line to stop, not add on another case, finish dictating tomorrow, whatever the tools are? How do you get out of the office?
I think that's a real challenge. And one of the things about being in private practice is that not only do you practice medicine, but you also have to run a business. And that's been very stressful, particularly during the COVID pandemic. I have 32 employees that are really more like my family. And so it's very difficult to know when to turn it off. It's also true in this day and time when you really can't get away from it, because you are never, more than a little far away from your phone, away from your computer, away from your iPad, and patients in the office can get to us after hours. The nice thing about otolaryngology, as we've alluded to, is you can really make it what you want it to be. And I think that your priorities need to be pure priorities. And you can tailor your practice to be as busy as you want to be for as much. It's very easy to work 10-hour days. And for me, it is. And I don't have one of those things in my head that sort of automatically says, okay, that's enough. But I've learned to over time. I had my first child when I was an intern, and she was a horse rider. And the only advice I'd give to anybody is don't buy your daughter a horse, because it will take all of your time and all of your money until they finally get rid of that. And that's what we did for
I'm going to get Rosie to come in and hear that part, but that's it.
don't buy her a horse. And then by the time she was through riding the horse and went to college with the horse, my son started playing lacrosse. And we live in Alabama, and you have to travel if you're going to play lacrosse, and if you live in Alabama, because it gets only competitive out of the Southeast. So we've spent a tremendous amount of time riding horses and playing lacrosse throughout their childhood. And I tried to consciously try not to be an absentee father. The practice can be all consuming. I've been on call every third night for 24 years. And I tend to be one of those guys that said, the problem with that is you miss 2/3 of the good cases. And I still feel that way. I still love it. I still love the practice, but I try to keep it in priority.
Well, I would like to share some of my what I've learned over the years, but I still am not good at it. So I don't have any golden rules, except to say one thing I've learned is that I'm still working on it, and that it is a very active process. For some of us, the active process is knowing when to stop and go home. But to keep that in your mind, the idea of, like Bill was saying, working 10 days, 14 hours, many of us, that's cool, no problem. You have to really be very active in saying, I'm going to stop at 6 p.m. or for my kids' recital or for the trip that I have to take with them. So active process. And, it's, I think for all of us, you heard, a work in progress. Let me just switch a little bit to Al. I just want you to first say officially, what are the major subdivisions within our specialty? How do you break it up? What are the major dominant places within our specialty in terms of types of surgery and patient problems?
From the practitioner standpoint, the heart of our field are those comprehensive otolaryngologists that fill every clinic, every state, everywhere. That's otolaryngology. For the choices, the choices that our students make, many of which to go further and subspecialize, that includes, I hope I may not get this alphabetically, but allergy is a big one. Otology, that's ear and hearing, very elegant, very established field, growing. Pediatric otolaryngology is a very attractive choice. Really get to focus on care of children and their complex medical and surgical diseases. Laryngology is my little field. It's a really, really cool field. Head and neck oncology. And then related to that, thyroid surgery, the elegance of thyroid surgery, it's very fascinating for folks. And then the other ones, of course, Dr. Gray and Dr. Frazal. I don't know, laryngology still would take any day you want. But the rhinology, of course, and I am sure I forgot something, but I think that's most of them. Sweet Jesus, hope I didn't forget anything.
Oh, facial
Plastics.
Oh my God, a quarter of our field. Yeah, so the average rhinoplasty done down your street, about, I don't know what the fraction is, but I think the majority of rhinoplasty done in the country today is still done by otolaryngologists. Just as one example. Aesthetic surgery, cosmetic surgery. Thank you so much for reminding me.
Now, I want to get to, we have many questions coming in the Q&A, and I really want to blend our planned agenda with the actual questions coming in so that we are of use to our audience, which now is in nearly 700. First of all, but before we get to those kind of, we've covered a lot about why would you want to go into the field so far, and we have focused on that because I think it was 46% of our registrants were first-year medical students. So we thought we'd want to dogpile on that issue of what is attractive, what did we find attractive, why would you go into it, what is it like? But now we want to move to some of the questions which are a little bit more focused perhaps from the second, third, and fourth years about how do I actually get in, and the sense that it's a competitive application process for residency. So I want to warm up the panel. That's what we want to be focusing on next to satisfy all of those questions. But before that, I just want to ask Zainab, what is the SRF?
Sure, I'd love to tell you about that. So the SRF is basically how trainees connect with the Academy. It's the section that's dedicated to us. So, and it also helps us connect with each other. We get a lot of support from our ENT Academy, including research grants or travel grants. I know a lot of you in the Q&A asked about humanitarian work or global health work. We actually get travel grants through the Academy for that we can apply for. We also have our own general session at the Academy meeting where it's basically all of us talking about issues pertaining to us. As residents, we also get to present our research along many of our senior attendings even, and participate in panel discussions. The Academy also has a Board of Governors arm, and as part of that meeting that happens in the spring, probably not this year, but I have been able to actually go to Capitol Hill and join in on our advocacy efforts as well, and talk to many people on Capitol Hill about issues that are important for our field and for our patients. So it is a very, very broad group within the Academy that really pulls in all the trainees and connects us with leaders in our field and sort of gives us the support we need during training. It's pretty fantastic. I don't know if, other specialties have a group like that that's so well connected.
Its success is in part due to Zainab's work and her colleagues. Angela, what is WIO? Could you tell us?
Women in Otolaryngology, affectionately WIO. So I am your immediate past chair of the section. We had a banner year my counterparts on our panel would agree, I am sure. We celebrated our 10-year anniversary last year as a section. And if you're a woman and you practice otolaryngology, you're in. That's all that's required. So with that being
They
said,
even allowed me to come to one of their luncheons, so I got that going for me.
I know we still need sponsors, so we still need the men. But there are some specific needs that female surgeons in our specialty, but female surgeons as a whole, have things like delaying child rearing and childbirth until after you've completed training, and the challenges related to that, fertility challenges and what have you. Pay inequity is an ongoing issue within multiple specialties that we focus on and tackle, and negotiating contracts. Women aren't always the best at advocating for themselves or looking for promotion and leadership opportunities. And we have an avenue for support and information available for training and assistance. And so the section, and we will give you the link if you send an email to students@entnet.org for our Women in Otolaryngology history documentary, which is available on YouTube, and it's a must see. And you can click on that link. I have a little section in there, but I am not the focus by any stretch. So join us. If you're a woman or if you're a man that wants to sponsor a woman, there's a reason for you to be in our specialty, and there's a reason for you to get involved in the section.
Bill, let me ask you just before we get off onto the residency application process and how to tips for success and recommendations. You have been very active in ENT Connect, and some of your posts have been really put a ball in my throat. Have been very thoughtful and really, really helpful. Some practical issues like do the surgery this way and you'll get a better outcome, or manage your office this way and you'll have less COVID spread. But some of them also were about just as a person, as a physician, working hard to help your colleagues. Now, I would imagine you're a pretty busy guy and these posts are fairly detailed. Why do you do that? And what is the sense of community? And maybe you should just explain a little bit what ENT Connect is.
Well, ENT Connect is our Academy-sponsored blog that we can all participate in. It's a chat room, and it goes out to all of the members of the Academy daily. And I have been very active in it. I was a strong proponent when that was developed. And I think that one of the things that we've all mentioned and we've all said is that the real beauty of the specialty of otolaryngology are the people who practice it. The men and women otolaryngologists are some of the brightest, most thoughtful, most wonderful men and women in all of healthcare. And I really mean that. And I don't say that just because it's my specialty. I looked at several other specialties when I was a medical student, and none of them were good fits. And I was exposed to otolaryngology through the neurosurgical service, and they just had what I wanted. They were very wonderful, bright, happy people that that were doing good work, and I wanted that. And that has been my experience all the way through my career. My two best friends in life are the two guys that I went through residency with. We had the best time of our lives, and we're still closest friends. And then for 24 years, I've had the same partner. I've had the same partners, and I have the very best friends through the Alabama Academy of Otolaryngology and then the American Academy of Otolaryngology. And so I like those connections. I like those personal connections. I like to journal. I like to thoughtfully write about things. And the open forum that you asked about has been an avenue to keep those connections very robust. Every time I write one of those things, I get 100 messages back, and I've made lots of friends through that forum. And so it's been very meaningful for me.
It's been very helpful for many. Let me ask now, Sonia, I was told back in the Jurassic period of our history when I applied that it was very competitive and very difficult to get in. And so can you comment on that? Can you comment on how difficult? Can you comment on what does a applicant need to be thinking about, research and so forth, and tips for success?
So yes, I think it does remain a competitive specialty. And again, I think that speaks to the attractiveness of the specialty itself. And we have some wonderful students who are applying. You know, my advice to our students is you need to really find good mentors to help you navigate this process. So there are so many aspects of the application. You know, I've seen some in the chats with regards to the step scores, you know, what do you need to do in terms of research, doing away rotations, letters of recommendation. There's so many parts to this whole application process. And I think, again, my advice to our students is to really find a good mentor in your department or at your institution to help guide you through this.
So let me ask Stacy, who is also a program director, can you comment on your view of tips for success, specifically mentioning, is research essential? Is that important? And also, I'm going to ask you also to mention about what about a case where individual doesn't have a department or a program at their school, and then how should they follow Sonia's recommendations about obtaining a mentor? Those are a lot of questions, sorry.
So I think the first thing is that you know, not everyone knows about otolaryngology early in medical school. That's very common. So I think there's often a lot of anxiety about people not recognizing it as a specialty until later, and that's okay. One of the most important things is, I think, having a chance to interact with other physicians that are practicing otolaryngologists. And so if you happen to be at a medical school where there is a department, where there's an otolaryngology department and where there's a residency, spending some time actually getting to know people in that department is very helpful. And I think especially for looking at the application process, looking at ways to strengthen your own application, all of those things I think are best done with a direct mentor. And if it happens to be someone within your school system, that's great. We all recognize that there are medical schools where there is not necessarily a residency program, because we don't actually have as many residency training programs in the country as we have medical schools. There are often still departments of otolaryngology that are associated with the medical school. And that is okay to have mentorship with practicing physicians that are in the Department of Otolaryngology, and they often will have connections because we are a fairly small field. So as many of the people who have mentioned who are on this call, they are not necessarily practicing within a university system, and yet often still interact with medical students and often have medical students that shadow with them. And we all have, because of this very rich network, personal connections are very, very helpful. Most places that do not have a department of otolaryngology or don't have a training program, we usually will try to really help students reach out to a nearby program that they can actually rotate with. And up until COVID, that has never been an issue. So up until this year, I think most programs welcome having a way visiting rotators that come with them. Being able to spend a month at a different institution is a wonderful way to get to know about another program. It can be a wonderful way to develop mentorship with people within another program. And most places are very, very open to that. Most programs have a lot of away rotators that come to spend time with them. We all really struggled this year just not having that opportunity because of COVID, because medical schools were obviously very concerned about the health of students and about having a lot of people transitioning into different healthcare systems, and so had to limit that. We are all hopeful that that will not be the case for this coming cycle, and yet we don't know. So we're all still in the process of really waiting for information from our home institutions about whether that's going to be an option or not. I can tell you that this year I did a lot of virtual mentorship for students that were in other programs. And I think many of the people on this panel and other people that I've spoken to did the same thing. And I think we've all really learned different and creative ways to help students that are interested in our field that don't have a home program. I think we all recognize that that's something that we would like to give students opportunities. And a lot of it has to do with just reaching out. And the other
The panelists will all be available to help coordinate these connections through that email address. So you have all of the panelists and the resources of the Academy and the panelists to help meet some of those needs. I'm sorry, Stacy, please go ahead.
No, that's fine. I think that the Academy has been wonderful as far as helping to facilitate some of this, these interactions. And there are many medical student groups through a lot of the different subspecialty societies that also do the same things as well. I think most of us are, as you can tell, very passionate about our field and really passionate about getting students interested in it. And so I want to make sure that people have every opportunity to experience it to determine that they really want to do this as a career.
Thank you. I wanted to ask Al about fellowships, but I'll do that in just a moment, but I'm just taken by this one Q&A question that's perversely from anonymous attendee. And it reads, and this is for Ken, I am a student that is still stuck between the appeals of traditional medicine and surgery. I find ENT procedures beautiful, but I'm hoping for a practice with relatively even amounts of medicine and surgical management. Can you accomplish that in otolaryngology? Ken, what's your answer to that?
Absolutely.
You
It's a
nailed it.
yes.
I mean, that is the essence of otolaryngology. And I think it's actually one of the things that really is most attractive about our specialty is that you can certainly follow the medical tract and you better like medicine, because most of us, certainly if you go into comprehensive general, 4 to 3.5 days of my week are spent seeing patients. And I love it actually, because that's the part where I have built familiar relationships, longitudinal relationships, and, long-term relationships with patients and their families and their children. And I really enjoy that quite a bit. And then the other days of the week I'm doing surgery. And so, yes, that is the blend that is the hallmark of otolaryngology. And as has been mentioned before too, we have a lot of flexibility. So that as one, for example, let's say we're doing a lot of surgery early in our career, but I've got a few partners that are in their 70s still working, but slowing down. And so they have opportunities to do other things that are non-surgical, whether it be the allergy piece, hearing and hearing aid pieces, even in-office minor procedures. So I think the breadth of what we offer is both sides for sure.
I want to ask Al now just about, so when you do an otolaryngology fellowship, then how many people do subsequent fellowships? What sort of circumstances would people do a fellowship after a residency? Give us a little landscape of that.
Thank you. I think the distinction that's really important is that in the past, the idea of doing specialty surgery beyond your otolaryngology training really was associated with academic practice. That just ain't so. Wherever you practice, if you're in Poughkeepsie or Tuscaloosa or in Wairika, California, many of the people getting hired are doing comprehensive otolaryngology, but they have a niche area that they have more depth in to add to their practice. And then many of them are going into some sort of academic or training environment. So when you apply to typically 1, some are 2 years programs where you add richness and depth in your area. And one thing I can say proudly about our otolaryngology training programs, which is distinct, not to put others down, from a lot of other specialties, when you do a fellowship, you are there as a trainee doing a fellowship. You really have a focus area. It's not one of these things where you're sort of intending, you do a little bit of fellowship work and they sort of let's say, get the most out of you while you're there. I mean, I've overseen a lot of fellowships in some of the institutional programs, and I'm very proud of the fellowships. They're high quality, they're carefully considered, and they offer a nice blend of apprenticeship and a curriculum that offers the rigidity and flexibility. So I'm proud of our fellowships, and I think the options for folks are great. I would say it's gone anywhere from 15, 20% up to 30, 40, 50% of some of the graduates nowadays, depending on where you're training, are going to some sort of additional practice. Not compulsory, not even the most common, but it does happen, and it's a great opportunity.
Great. Angela, I want you to comment on underrepresented minority in otolaryngology and your experiences, your challenges, and what you see as the future blossoms ahead of us.
Okay, wow, that can't be covered in 10 minutes. So what we will do is first, I will say that being underrepresented in medicine is an opportunity. It's not a detriment. It's not something to shy away from. It's not a reason to feel that you won't get into the specialty. So we'll start there and see yourself as yet another applicant with dreams and aspirations, with the capacity to learn and to grow in the same way that any of your majority counterparts would. So when you think of yourself that way and you present yourself that way, and stand tall amidst your peers, and don't shy away from opportunities for research or for travel or for humanitarian work, or to take on roles and responsibilities in leadership, or to participate at the medical school in admissions or in medical student advocacy, or take on roles in organized medicine, just because you think that you're going to be disenfranchised as an underrepresented minority. I want you to change your outlook on this specialty, because it's fantastic and it's diverse in what we're able to do. And now we just need to make it diverse in what we look like. With that, I would also like to advocate that medical students in this forum consider membership to the Barnes Society. And so you saw that I am currently the president of Harry Barnes Society, chair of the ENT section for the National Medical Association. Harry Barnes was the first African American to be board certified in a surgical subspecialty. And by the way, it happened to be otolaryngology. He patented the hypothescope, which was used for pituitary surgery, and no one knows who he is. And so we can advocate for ourselves by using the history that is also rich, and encouraging our counterparts that don't necessarily look like us, but have the same drive and passion in the field that we do, to recognize our worth and our value in the field. So apply, be strong, be motivated, be active, and communicate with individuals that don't necessarily look like you, who are just as interested in your success as the people that do look like you. And I think I'll stop there.
Awesome. So thank you so much. Let me ask you, Bill, we've gotten some comments from the Q&A that there are some parts of otolaryngology that dovetail, interact with other areas. So for example, facial plastics, someone interested in that could go into ENT, they could go into general surgery and do facial plastics. Cleft work, the same thing. Thyroid surgery, general surgery is one pathway, otolaryngology is another pathway. Stacy and Sonia's skull base surgery could be approached from neurosurgery and then back down to skull base, or otolaryngology up to skull base. What can you make some comments, and that's open to any of the panelists, because it's multiple areas where otolaryngology kind of dovetails its activity with others, and so there are different pathways. Bill, what can you tell us about that?
Well, I think that there's a little bit of overlap with our other colleagues or other specialists. I work very closely with our oral surgeons locally. We do a fair amount of work together. We refer patients back and forth. We work with our plastic surgeons, and there's a fair amount of overlap there. Interestingly, there are some things that general surgeons and ENT surgeons have typically sort of fought over turf battles, at least in the community setting, thyroids being one of those. It seems like we've won that battle. I think in our facility and around here, 80% or more of thyroid surgery is done by otolaryngologists now. And there is quite a bit of overlap. I think that, I personally had an interest initially in ENT through neurosurgery, and then after that through head and neck surgery, but that was with a general surgeon at UAB. And he told me, he said, if you're going to do what I do, you have to go into otolaryngology. And that's how I ended up getting interested in it.
Nice. I'm going to jump around to a couple of different questions based in part on the Q&A that's coming in. So Stacy, are there like essential core metrics that individuals should have before they consider applying to otolaryngology? Do you need a certain board score? Do you need a certain number of honors? Do you need a year of research? Do you need publications? You know, is there flexibility? Are there golden metrics that you could follow? What are your thoughts about that?
So there are a lot of questions about this in the chat. And before I try to answer it, I think one of the important things to know is that it is different for every single program across the country. So each residency training program has a little bit of a different view on what they're looking for. And so they review medical school applicants in that way. So it is very, very important, again, to have a mentor, because what you really need is you need someone that on a personal level for you can look at your entire application and help you understand what your strengths and potential weaknesses are. I think that although there is a lot of emphasis on board scores, a lot of the questions in the chat are related to the fact that we all know that it's going to pass fail. I can tell you that our program does not have a board score cutoff. And I think some people think that there's like a magic number that you have to have above in order to have your application reviewed. And that's not the case for our program, and it's not the case for a lot of programs across the country. I think the biggest thing to focus on is really what we really care about, which has more to do with professional and clinical performance on rotations. So your relationship that you have, not just with otolaryngologists, but on your internal medicine rotation, on your surgical rotations, on the other rotations that you do, and not just how well you take a test, but we really do look at the comments from the people that are evaluating performance, meaning how you interact with patients, how you interact with your peers, how you interact with the residents, how you interact with the faculty, how you interact with the person in the office, all of those things are things that we really do pay attention to, which is reflected in the dean's letter. It's reflected in your letters of recommendation. And again, the other thing that I'll emphasize here is this is a very small field in many ways, and there are not that many training programs across the country, and we all really do know each other. So, and that's a real benefit, I think, for students as well, because we really do know when we read a letter of recommendation, we invariably know who that letter is coming from. So that really, I think, is part of what is extremely important for an applicant's package, more than a board score. So if you're going to spend time doing something, I think making relationships, asking questions, learning about the field, and doing well, performing well on rotations ultimately is much more important than just one single score, especially as that's going to pass fail. And we all recognize that. And again, I think the other thing that's really important is having someone that is really going to advocate for you from the program where you're coming from. And so developing that relationship with a mentor within your program, or working, if your school doesn't have a program, finding a program where you can do a rotation and show your performance so that you have that mentor, that really, I think, is what is the most important.
Excellent. Thank you. That encompasses a lot of the questions. I want to just take one moment and again, thank all of the panelists whom I respect so much. And I just wanted to make sure if any of the panelists, by looking at the chat or just by thinking, have any other important comments, since we're nearing towards the end of the session, I really wanted to give you all the opportunity to make any other disparate comments and so forth that you would like to make from any of the panelists.
I did want to just clarify one thing related to endoscopic skull-base surgery, which is that is done in conjunction with neurosurgeons. And there were a lot of comments in the chat about collaboration. I think that's one of the greatest things about our field. When I'm doing those surgeries, I do work directly with the neurosurgeon. We're working together. And then I might be doing the opening and the reconstruction, but the actual surgical resection of the intracranial tumor is a neurosurgeon. Similarly, we work with orbital surgeons as well. So, and some other people have already mentioned oral surgery. I just wanted to make sure no one thinks that it would be atypical for an otolaryngologist to actually be doing the neurosurgery.
That's an interesting point that we haven't really focused on, but you would think each of us in our hyper subspecialties would say, like, I'm going to do the surgery and I don't really care about what anybody else says, and I don't want to talk to anybody. I want to do what I think is right. But for me, having done thyroid surgery for 30 years, I love to talk to the endocrinologist and get their input. And if they have a more clever idea than me, I think, damn, that's a great idea. Let's all talk about that. That kind of willingness and joy and interest in collaborating with other specialties is another like kind of ingredient that we all have in our DNA. Al, you were going to say something?
I'm sorry, I was all pre-verbal and ready. Looking at programs, talking to folks, there is no specialty that interacts with every single person in the hospital the way otolaryngology does. Every medical specialty, every surgical specialty. We are partners. We are part of the community like no other. We can talk medicine, we can talk surgery, we can talk short-term, we can talk long-term, we can talk neurology, we can talk to cancer. This is what we do, and you are the connector for your community.
Let me just say one other thing that is also a little bit of a jump, and I want Zanab and also Sonia to comment on this, that we had talked about like the cool tools and toys that we have and the amazing equipment and how, I mean, I'm in love with the snap that I use for thyroid surgery, which is a pretty low tech, but I'm pretty committed to it. So, but there are, that kind of vibe of like the equipment, that there's a lot of changes that can occur. I mean, I'm working now on parathyroid autofluorescence to determine parathyroid identity during thyroid surgery. And, several years ago, I had no clue about that. And now I'm using all these cool tools. Sonia, can you tell us your sense of how ENT is changing? Will it be continuing to change? Will there be ongoing incorporation of new technology? And Zanab, I'd like your thoughts in the same.
Well, absolutely. I look at, the span of my 25 years in practice, endoscopes were just coming into the market. Navigation systems were just being developed for navigation for sinus surgery, and so a lot of the neurosurgical work that we do with our colleagues. The microscope has been just sort of a workhorse for otolaryngologists, and those continue to be refined. Dr. Marati could speak to this, and laryngology and endoscopes that we use in those cases. And now robots and transoral robotic surgery, which is just, I think, really attractive for medical students to see how that has evolved over time. So continually, absolutely, I think, just to answer your question, that as new technology comes into the market, we seem to be at the forefront of this in otolaryngology, and it's really exciting to be a part of that.
Zanab, you had mentioned about our cool toys that we have to play with. What is your sense of how things will change?
So now we're basically in the world of 3D printing, and I think ENT is one of those fields that has really been monopolizing on that. There's there's surgeries like drilling mastoids for cochlear implants, for instance, and especially for children. It turns out it's good to have drilled before you drill your first one on a kid. And so we have 3D mastoids that you can print and drill, which has been awesome. And a lot of that. So in addition to the surgical toys, we're doing a lot on the forefront on medical drug delivery as well. So some of the work I did in our lab was looking at enhancing sinonasal drug delivery. So working on new devices and studying how they would deliver more medication to sinuses before and after surgery. So there's so much that's going on. We've come such a long way, but it's so exciting because there's so much more to explore that many of us are actively doing. So I think it's a super exciting time to be an ENT, especially for you guys who are going to be applying soon.
I want to share a really, really cool comment that Robert Frederick has mentioned. As we've discussed, time is so precious. Thank you all for choosing to spend it tonight helping us hopeful otolaryngologists. Much appreciated. So I think that's feeding all of our panelists here. And Elise is reminding us that we've had over 200 questions, and we realize we've not gotten to all of them, but forward them to our email address, and we'd be happy to continue to work on them with you. Again, this is the beginning of a relationship and a beginning of a welcome to our field. Ken, please.
Thank you, Greg. I just wanted to make one final remark on my end, which is the Academy is truly a home for anybody who may choose our specialty. That we have many ways that we are working so hard at trying to be inclusive of everybody. You heard from two of the sections that we have, the residents and fellows, the women in OTO. We have a young physician section, and we have something called the Board of Governors, which is really designed to listen and hear grassroots member concerns, to sort of take it to heart, intake it, and then kind of close the loop in a bidirectional fashion. So there's many pathways for growth, leadership, and advancement within the specialty. So we certainly hope many of you will consider joining us.
I think it's been really exciting for me to be listening to all of your comments and wisdom and cumulative experience over the time, from personal commentary to career advice. It's been inspirational to me. So I really thank Angela, Bill, Stacy, Ken, Zanab, Sonia, Al, and Pam and Elise. Thank you so much for all of your time and work. We really do welcome you to what is an amazing field and a wonderful life as an otolaryngologist, head and neck surgeon. I'll sign off and thank everyone for a safe, happy, healthy, and vaccinated 2021.